Hey,
Hey
what's
everyone.
going on, everybody? This is Andrew from Expedition STEM.
Hey guys, I'm Chris here as well.
Today we're doing our weekly STEM news. Um, so Chris, how was your week?
So far, so good. I've been having a lot of fun playing with Alexa. Really excited about the new ones that are coming out. I think you ordered a new one, right?
Weekly STEM. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
I
I
had
mean,
some
things
other.
are everything's popping up at the same time. This is the hazard, folks, of us doing a live show.
Right.
Is that everything pops up at the same time? We get distracted easily. Somebody says squirrel, we look around. Yeah. So no, I think you ordered the new Alexa, if I remember correctly, which maybe we'll include that in our new review that we're doing later this week. By the way, I got to say it's been really fun doing these daily STEM podcasts for everybody. It's if you haven't downloaded or subscribed to the podcast yet, it's 3 minutes, just a quick news brief. We talk about the top 4 stories in science, technology, engineering, and math. And they end up getting it's cool because a couple of stories that we've had on the show in the mornings have actually broken and become major news stories in the past couple of days, and more news outlets are picking up. So it's nice to be on the cutting edge of some of the breaking news here.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, should
All
we
right,
go ahead and jump into our top 4 topics of the day?
we shall.
Alrighty. Well, I think you've got the first one on our science news today.
Yeah, so the first thing we're going to talk about today, so we're going to go over the STEM topics of the week. And so the first one, science, we're going to be talking about Scott Kelly, the NASA astronaut returning to Earth, and then also about NASA astronaut applications. So if you didn't know, Scott Kelly is sort of in the news now for being the astronaut, the American astronaut who's spent the longest time in space. So just a little background, he graduated from Mountain High School in 1982, received a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering from the State University of New York, aka SUNY. Um, and he got a MS degree in aviation systems from University of Tennessee. He's a retired U.S. Navy captain. He has an identical twin brother who was also a astronaut, and
Hey,
they
what do you know? That's quite a bit of a similarity there.
yeah, maybe I can apply sometime. Uh, those were the only siblings to ever travel in space. Um, Scott Kelly's first space flight was on the Discovery space shuttle in 1999. Then he was on another space shuttle in 2007. That was STS-118. He was the engineer and commander of Expedition 25 and 26, starting in late 2010 on the International Space Station. And more recently, he's been the commander of the ISS during the one-year mission, as it's known, starting in 2015. So Scott Kelly left March 27, 2015, and he returned on March 1st, 2016. Um, both
Now, during that time, I mean, he was up there 340 days. And if
Mhm.
you think about that, being almost an entire year, he also conducted over 400 experiments while he was up there, which means he was very efficient with his time. Weren't just doing experiments one at a time, but running a few simultaneously. But I don't think any were quite as important as the one that he was the subject of NASA really trying to figure out what the long-term effects on the human body are with space travel for a possible manned mission to Mars. I mean, it's going to be amazing to see. Of course, he came back to Earth also 2 inches taller than his brother, partly because of while you're in space, everything stretches out and all the discs between your vertebrae can reinflate. Being in 0 G, but it's interesting to see, and I think NASA's going to have a fun time just looking at all the data over time of what happens to his body for prolonged, to set the baseline for a prolonged space flight.
Right. Yeah. So it was a good thing he had a twin too, because they're going to be comparing, not only the height difference, but also things having to do with their vision and their muscles and their bones. So as Chris mentioned, when you're in zero gravity, you're stretched out a little bit, but There's other things that weaken there's other things that weaken, including your bones, because they don't have to put up with the gravity. Your muscles weaken a little bit as well, and your vision. Sometimes your heart can weaken because it doesn't have to work as hard to push blood around your body.
And his muscles weakened to the point where he actually had to be carried out of the space capsule because his muscles had atrophied. He wasn't able to get up. And I think part of that's also the full weight of the spacesuit and everything and being in a Soyuz capsule. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt of having a little extra weight on there than just his body. But still, I mean, not being in space for almost a year, not having to use those muscles as much as anybody else, I'm sure that's going to be a bit of an impact.
Yeah, so NASA said he exercised over 700 hours and ran over 648 miles on the space treadmill. He also was witness to almost 11,000 sunrises and sunsets while in space.
That's a lot of days and nights.
Yeah. So he doesn't hold a record for the most amount of time in space, like as a world record, just the American. There's another cosmonaut who holds that record.
Very cool.
Chris, would you ever go into space?
I don't know. I mean, being a father of two small kids, so much can go wrong. It makes me second guess some of the choices that I would do these days. I still have doubts about. Well, I would love to go to space. Do I want to go to space? Yes. Given the chance to go to space, it depends on how safely I can get there, and I think that's the biggest challenge. Even SpaceX has trouble just landing a rocket that orbited the Earth. Getting out there on a private charter. It's a good question. I don't know.
I would go.
Yeah, but see, I have even trouble jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, and you've done that well over however many hundreds of times that you've jumped and parachuted.
Right.
So.
All right, so yeah, that brings us to kind of our other sort of side topic with NASA. So if y'all didn't know, NASA, every 4 years, they look for new astronaut candidates, and this year was one of those years again. So mid-December, they started accepting astronaut applications, and they just recently cut it off a few weeks ago. So they ended up getting almost 18,000 applicants, and there's only about 14 spots available. So your chance of getting selected is 0.065%. The previous record for astronaut applications was in 1978 when they got over 8,000 applications. And the second record was the last time they had a application, and that was in 2012 when they had about 6,000 applicants. So, a lot of people are wondering why, the last time this happened, it was, a difference of 10,000 applicants. So why are there so many people applying? Well, a lot of people are thinking social media, Twitter, Facebook, a lot of these social media platforms have been sort of blowing up, in the past few years. So a lot of people are seeing, Scott Kelly posting on Twitter, these space pictures and things like that. So I think a lot more people are getting interested. Also, they think that the movie The Martian starring Matt Damon had a lot to do with it as well, because NASA eventually wants to go to Mars, and, whoever is selected this time, that they may have a possibility of going to Mars,
right.
Not in the near future, but, a little bit distant.
Well, if they end up using the laser propulsion that we talked about in our weekly or our daily podcast, that they say that they can actually push a unmanned aircraft in Mars in about 3 days using laser propulsion, if that actually happens. And it would be traveling at 1/3 the speed of light by the time that it gets there. Now, slowing down might be another issue. I wouldn't want to imagine what a crater looks like when something going 1/3 of the speed of the light lands on the surface of Mars. And I think the estimate was that it could take as little as a month for a manned spacecraft to get there. Now, today's estimates, I think it's 11 months to get there from a manned spacecraft.
Yeah, it's something like that, between like 9-10 months.
Yeah, so being able to dramatically reduce the time frame for us to get there is one part of it. Getting off the rock when you get there is the second part of it. So sure, you can send a manned mission to Mars. Now the question is, how do they get off the rock once they get there? So you need at least a different, lander system, different type of fuel systems. There's perchlorate on the surface, so maybe you're mining and refining your own fuel when you get there. So those are a lot of things. I actually had the opportunity to sit next to Buzz Aldrin at the Popular Mechanics Breakthrough Technology Awards several years ago, and we were sitting next to the Phoenix lander crew, who'd also won an award, and we were all talking about a manned mission to Mars, and the discussion and the where Buzz had taken it was, you really need somebody to commit to not only just going for a year, but going for 4 years, because what it's going to take for us with modern fuel, with modern techniques, in order to not only have the fuel to get there, but to have the fuel to get off the rock and come home.
Right. Did you see The Martian, Chris?
I did see The Martian.
How did you like it?
I loved it. I read the book. I thought it was great. I thought it was inspiring to see, just a great story of how people rally around, pushing science forward to bring the guy home. I think it's interesting as well. A lot of the things that there's two things that I like most. One, a lot of the modern, what we would know as duct tape or things, the tarp materials, things that we would be accustomed to here that they talk about that NASA has actually developed, very airtight fabrics. Those are things that I think are can revolutionize the way that we make payloads light and actually get to places. And I think the other part of it was he had said that not only was it the University of Chicago had said that when you get to a place and you actually grow food, you have officially colonized the place where you had landed. That, and then because he had also stolen a vehicle in international waters, he was essentially a space pirate. So I think those are, fun little facts about being the only man on Mars. Yes, you had colonized it, or he had colonized it, and he was officially a space pirate. The one thing I didn't like, however, were the interviews that I saw of people who saw the movie afterwards that thought it was a true story. So I can't recite the number of times that I saw Jimmy Kimmel or some of the late night hosts interviewing people after seeing it, and they really thought it was a true story, based on a true story. Yeah.
Yeah. So if any of you are interested in becoming an astronaut, it's too late for this time, but maybe in another 4 years. But here are the basic qualifications for applying to be an astronaut. You need to have a bachelor's degree in almost a STEM field. It's not really STEM, it's going to be SEM, science, engineering, and math. They don't really say technology is a
cop out.
Yeah. You also need three plus years of professional experience, whether you're like an engineer, mathematician, teacher, something like that. You need to be able to pass a NASA astronaut physical. Now, I'm not really sure what that is, but I mean, you probably need to be in physical standing. You need to have good eye vision. I think you can have LASIK now, but you need to be fit. You also need to pass background check. So, no criminals in space.
They don't want real space pirates up there.
If you're a civilian, you would apply through usajobs.gov. And if you're a military, you would apply through your appropriate branch. Here's sort of the timeline. So for this vacancy, it was announced on December 14th. So that's when the application started. The application ended on February 18th. And then through September, the qualified applications are going to be reviewed. From October to December, they're going to determine who should be interviewed. And from February of 2017 through April of 2017, the interviewees are going to be brought to the Johnson Space Center in Houston. And that is probably about 120 people that they're going to be interviewing. So they've already going to be taken down from 18,000 people 120 are going to be going there. From there,
Mm-hmm.
they'll find out who they want. So in about June 2017, we're going to find out who the astronaut class is. And just because you're in a class doesn't even mean you're going to be an astronaut. You still have to pass the class.
Yep. And of course, some people who pass the astronaut exams never become astronauts. They're just sitting in the wings or backup researchers that might have the opportunity to get sent up. Then again, you're always subject to government funding, whether enough there is enough money in the bank to send you up to Mars, right, thanks to government appropriations.
One thing
speaking of government, I was going to say, speaking of government, that might actually be a good segue for us to talk about. You spent about 5 hours of your time watching the entire Apple and FBI hearings this week, which brings us to our technology story this here. Congress had their hearings. You got a lot of good information about it. What did you find about Apple that or FBI and Loretta Lynch's plans on lynching Apple?
Well, what was interesting is, so I found out that the FBI didn't really try anything before they asked Apple to do it. I mean, of course they tried stuff, but they didn't really try hard enough. The Judiciary Committee asked them, hey, did you guys talk to other government agencies? Did you figure out what's going on? And they said, yeah, we talked to whoever would talk to us. Now that's kind of, and they didn't really go into detail of who they talked to. So they had an expert there also who is an expert on cryptography, and she was saying, the FBI director said that they talked to people, but he didn't say who they talked to. And I guarantee you that the NSA would be the only people, or not the only people, but they would definitely be the first ones to talk to. But even if the NSA was able to crack the iPhone, they might not want to share that information, because if they were to share that information, they can't really do it in private, because anything that is done through that court order has to be like public record. So right. If NSA had a tool to get into the iPhone, they can't really give it to the FBI without it being public knowledge that NSA has a tool to get into your iPhone. So they might, be hesitant in order to do that. The FBI director was basically saying that, this is a one case scenario. We're not asking to get in other phones. Well, we're just asking to get in this phone. And they didn't really present too much evidence. It was just the FBI director. He's not a, specialist in forensics or anything like that. They didn't bring anybody with them. So he was basically saying, we need to get in this iPhone for national security. That was sort of his thing. He was making the argument that, there could be data in there that could lead to other arrests or foiling other terror plots, things like that. But even he acknowledged that if they open up this iPhone, it might set precedent for the government to request Apple to open up any phone afterwards.
Right. Well, and FBI, or not FBI, the U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch was at the RSA conference this past week, and she was even questioned by Bloomberg about it, where she essentially said, do we want one company telling the Justice Department, the FBI, or anybody how they are allowed to conduct their investigations, essentially saying that the power of a company is really that strong that it can bully its way through the judicial system. I personally don't think that that's possible at all, even though we've seen that the High Court has given First Amendment protections to companies themselves. They've given rights to companies to protect and not self-incriminate. Those are a lot of the things that I think there are opportunities for for these companies to protect protect themselves, protect their customers, and protect their IP as well. I mean, there's a lot of IP and a lot of money that's invested in this, and giving it skeleton key even if it's a one-off chance, like you said, and like the FBI director admitted, sets a precedent where not only are you giving a backdoor and admitting that you can create a backdoor, but you're also potentially opening yourself, your customers, the government up at greater risk. You know, a lot of government agencies had pushed to secure iPhones or Blackberries or, you know, all the different types of devices that if there's admitted, you know, skeleton keys that you can get into one type of device and is still available out there. Well, what's to say that there's not a hacking group or international organization or somebody who wouldn't want to try to either create an exploit or find it and utilize that exploit to whatever ends that they want. So there are risks of creating it that I think the FBI recognizes. There are risks to using it and forcing a company to have it that the FBI recognizes. But at the same time, they're still saying, but we want it. We want it. We want it. We want it.
Yeah, and one of the problems that I saw for the, I guess for both sides is, so essentially, and if you guys aren't really tracking what's going on, you know, San Bernardino phone used by terrorists, it's locked, they can't get into it, has a password on it, and if there's a possibility, although they don't know, that if you enter in the incorrect password in 10 times, that it will erase all data. So the court ordered Apple to create a backdoor for the FBI. So they're asking for three things that backdoor is comprised of. The first thing is to disable the auto erase feature. So that means that they can try as many passwords as they want and the data will not be erased. The second thing is to get rid of the time delay in between consecutive tries. So maybe I think for the first 5 tries, you can go ahead and try, but afterwards it goes like, you know, you have to wait a minute and then 10 minutes and then like half an hour, things like that. So they want to get rid of that. The third thing, which is really interesting, is they also want to have the password submitted electronically so that someone doesn't have to tap on their phone. Now, one of the, I forget if it was Apple or one of the hearing committee members brought up a good point. The first two kind of make sense if you're the FBI and, you know, you're trying to get this phone. The third doesn't make too much sense, submitting electronically, unless you're trying to set a precedent to open other phones. Because if you got rid of the time delay and the auto erase feature, it would take, and I kind of calculated this out, you know, if it's a 4-digit password, how long would it take you to try 10,000 different passwords? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's probably not going to take you 10,000 tries because you'll eventually hit the number, unless it's 9999. But it would take about 24 to 30 hours, depending on, you know, how, and you could have different people rotating shifts trying these numbers. So it's not like it would take a lot of time. You know, it's already been a few months that they've been waiting for this phone to get unlocked. So they think the electronic submission of the passcodes was specifically put in that court order to make sure that if this thing gets approved, that, you know, all of these other phones that are going to be trying that, they can just submit it electronically rather than have to do it by hand. So
yeah. No, I think that the most compelling thing that the Attorney General said, it's really about how we access evidence everywhere, she said, comparing law enforcement requests for data on mobile phones to officials with search warrants seeking access to information inside of a house. So they see it as, or at least she sees it as, the defiance of Apple or the challenge of Apple to not comply, you know, tantamount to anybody just not following a court order for any type of evidence. You know, if somebody were to pick a lock at a place that they had, you know, a court order to do so, they can pick a lock at a physical location. This being a digital storage device and you don't have a key, there's no way to pick the lock. They see this as, you know, kind of a paradigm shift of where the extent of the law can take you to compel somebody to open it.
Right, and one of the interesting thing is that each side is having a hard time figuring out a good analogy to this. There's almost no case in history that is analogous to this case. Of course, there's a lot of searches and seizures and warrants and that sort of thing, but try and think of a time when someone was forced to create something that did not exist before to help the government. Picking a lock, making a lock, that technology already exists to making a key, that sort of thing. Apple does not have a process or anything to crack their iPhone. So, there's only a few committee members that were for the FBI. Almost everyone was for Apple, but some of them were trying to make an analogy. Well, you can, I don't know the exact situation, but you can compel a doctor to perform surgery on a person who's been shot and they're trying to get the bullet out. Like, I guess there's been cases like that when that's actually happened before. So he was trying to say, well, if you can force somebody to go into somebody's body and pull a bullet out, then why can't you order someone to, hack an iPhone? That doesn't seem right to me. But, the other people were saying that technology, or that process already exists, and even so, just because that one doctor goes in and gets that bullet, that doesn't open any doors for other people to start performing surgeries. Like, it doesn't give anybody else tools to perform surgeries. As if Apple created the backdoor for the FBI, it could potentially leak out and allow bad people to start hacking iPhones.
Right. Well, and I think the only way that they've been able to actually even get the court order to begin with was by digging up a law from 1798, an antiquated law that went back that far. And I actually have to do my own research to figure out, or 1789. I'd have to go back and research that law as well. But I mean, back to the days of Thomas Jefferson, or how far back you have to go for figuring out what law they're using in order for us to give it to them.
Yeah, and the All Writs Act, that's I heard, a lot of people have been saying, oh, they're trying to use this like 200-year-old document. Well, if you think about it, the Constitution's even older, so it's not so much that it's an old document; it's at what was the context that it was written in. That sort of
exactly. Exactly.
And
what was the framers' intent when they wrote it?
Yeah, and it's and even if you didn't have the intent known or whatever, what can that then be interpreted as, and what can you use it for? Because it basically allows the All Writs Act is the thing that the government uses for to get companies to compel them to do certain things. Like if they were to, Apple's always been cooperating with the government. Getting into old phones, so they had no problem complying with the All Writs Act before. It's just now it's like, okay, well, before, this is stuff we could do. This is something that we don't do now. Breaking the encryption. So
right.
Another thing that's interesting right around this time. So right now iOS is on 9.2. The beta for 9.3 has been released to developers, and guess what is on there? It is a little message, and I think it's under like the About phone or something that says, and if you're using a work phone, it says something that like your supervisor is monitoring this phone and location or something like that, like your internet traffic and location. So there are ways for your company phone. If you have a company phone, your company can see a lot of things you do, but there was no really way of it kind of like being in your face for the employee that was happening. So now they're putting a message on there, and that came out just this week, like after the hearing. So, I think that's one more move towards privacy, where it's kind of like, hey, dummy, if you're doing something stupid on your work phone, you better not, because people are seeing this.
Right. Well, I think we've talked about cell phones for a bit, but the future of cell phones is actually taking us a little bit further. Our engineering story today actually takes a look at how the rise of virtual reality is actually helping us in a variety of new areas. You've got the Samsung Gear VR. which also, by the way, is now shipping for free for people who held out for the S7, unlike Andrew.
Only during pre-order. So
only if you pre-ordered it, yes.
yeah, you better get it within the next week if you want that free Gear VR.
Yeah, and if you don't want the free Gear VR, you can go to Sweden and get the Mick cardboard, as Andrew called it this morning, where they are actually giving a Happy Meal that folds into a Google Cardboard that you can then put your cell phone in and use for VR. One of the cool applications, though, from VR is actually using gaming engines for construction. We came across an article today that talked about how Google, with their HoloLens, how a couple of other companies are creating engineering software that not only creates a 3D model of the space that's being constructed, but can also in the future project what the plans are onto the building. So if you have a projector set in a corner, it can actually project on the floor. So when you're pouring concrete, you can know exactly where the posts or the pipes and everything are, so you're not having to clear things out of the way or making sure that stuff is run correctly. The other thing is that I noticed this playing Call of Duty. I've kind of become a Call of Duty addict of late. But playing Call of Duty, I in one of the multiplayer scenes, I actually went out in to a small building, was looking around and noticed that somebody had taken the time to put in all the HVAC, the heating and ventilation systems. Somebody had put in lights and broken lights the right way, as if it were a derelict or shot up building. The amount of detail and the architecture that's going into these buildings is the same, and that you're able to walk around and navigate and see in a virtual space. By the way, I got shot to heck while I was admiring the architecture. But now they're taking that model, and you take your blueprints, you can actually create a virtual 3D model, and before you start construction, you can walk through. As you're doing the construction, you can make sure that, okay, this component's here, this component's here, and everything's built in sequence as it needs to be built. And I think it's also an interesting thing about safety. I mean, being able to walk through a construction site prior to it being completed, when stuff has to be outlined, if you're able to do that virtually, it prevents a lot of construction-based accidents or things that can happen while you're doing inspections, or things that aren't, floors that aren't completely set, or walking across I-beams, which can be pretty dangerous to do, even on the ground. So I think the safety benefits are another amazing element of the VR with architecture and construction here.
Now, do they have any idea how they're going to do this? I mean, I've seen the Microsoft HoloLens and that sort of thing, but how and the Gear VR is easy to track your head,
right?
But how is it going to know, like, okay, you're in this room now, and I know that? How does it know what room you're in? I guess if you're walking around a construction site, how does it know you're at that construction site?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. First of all, virtually, if you're sitting at a desk, it's easy to just walk through it the same way that you would Halo or Doom or some of the old PC games that came out years ago. You've created a 3D environment that you can walk through. I think the other part of it is comparisons, because what you can do is you can put sensor arrays or RFID tags, which a lot of construction places are doing now, is they're putting RFID tags in buildings and echo or repeaters, so that if you have an integrated system, it in the event of an accident, who's in the vicinity or of that area. It's kind of like the old miners tags, where you would have a tag on the board when you went into the mine, and you take your tag off the board when you came out of the mine. In this case, many of the construction helmets now have RFID tags built inside of them. So as you pass an I-beam, it will count how many times you've gone by it, or where you're in proximity, so that if a crane collapses, if an earthquake happens, if an unfortunate event, any type of accident, you'll know who's within the vicinity. Makes it easier for head counts. Now, that type of integrated system if you have projector systems installed, if you have ways for you to see how things are going to be built, or you're using a HoloLens or cardboard or some sort of on-screen, glasses that might have an on-screen display, or looking at the infrared. If it's broadcast in infrared, and now you've got a pair of glasses that can see infrared, you can make sure that everything is actually in line of where you need to place things, or before you even put an I-beam in place, or put up a strut for a wall, or install the conduit for electricity. You'll know where it's supposed to run in a wall, so that you can actually line it up and have it match the plans. You won't be over by a foot or two from where the original plans are. You'll actually be dead on where the architects or the trades folks had designed it to go. So that's part of the future of it. Microsoft and some of the other companies hope that this can actually be installed onto the construction sites, not just done in the back office like it's done right now, not on in the foreman's trailer, or any of the job site management booths, but actually something that every worker can benefit from, who's on a large construction site, or even a home construction site, just depending on how advanced the construction process is.
One thing that I would love to see for augmented reality is driving in your car and you look out your windows and there are, not projections, but, some sort of like, hologram on your windows where you can like look over, and if, like, let's say if you're navigating to somewhere, a blue line would be on the road, showing you where to turn. Then when you get to your destination, there would be like an arrow pointing to the building. Mm-hmm. Or if you're like looking for food, you can like hit a button and you'll see like all the little spots on the window kind of like pop up, but not super opaque, just a little bit transparent, so you can still see objects that are, important for safety.
Well, there's a lot of companies now that are even trying to create heads-up displays for vehicles. I know the high-end cars of Mercedes, as well as BMW and Lexus, have all been working with heads-up display companies to use OLED. Since OLED can also be clear, or OLED can be an OLED projection, to create a dash-mounted projection onto your windshield. That way you can have whether it be phone information, somebody's calling you, turn-by-turn navigations. You can even eliminate the in-dash information for your speedometer or any of the other electronic readings, and actually display that on the screen, so that now you've got a cleaner surface. You don't have to look away from the road. You can keep everything in front of you on the road, which was the original purpose of Google Glass, was to keep everything within access, or the Google glasses was to keep everything within within view for you, so you didn't have to be distracted. They were supposed to be an aid. I remember there was a case in Southern California where a guy was pulled over wearing his Google Glass, and they wanted to cite him for distracted driving. He actually had the case thrown out because he proved, and they even had the judge put the glasses on and show how inobtrusive it was to have something just slightly displayed in front of you that you can access with head gestures. Of course, the guy's sitting there going like this the entire time, like the guys from A Night of the Roxbury, trying to get things activated. But still, having that integration, being able to display things in front of you, makes it absolutely, I think, easier to have better accuracy. I think whether you're driving, whether you're doing construction, whether you're creating any sort of engineering tasks, virtual reality, I think, is something that's actually going to become a really big part. And there's a company that I'm hoping that we actually get a chance to try their heads-up display. It's called NAVDY, N-A-V-D-Y. Buddy of mine works for the company. They're just shipping out their beta units right now, and if we're lucky, we'll be able to get to test one as well. So look out for that one.
Another interesting story that I saw today is that Six Flags is going to start integrating. I don't know if they're Gear VRs, but it did say a Samsung VR into their roller coasters. And at first, when I was reading this, I thought, "Oh, that's cool. Six Flag is going to put a camera on a roller coaster and then have it available for Samsung Gear VR, and you can feel like you're on a roller coaster." Actually, what they're doing is people are going to be wearing the Gear VR while they're on the roller coaster at Six Flags. And I was like, "What's the point of that? Like, you're already on a roller coaster. Why would you?"
Is that just so everybody can have the view from the front seat?
Well, it's not that. They're gonna. This sounds crazy, and I can't wait to try it. They're gonna. I mean, imagine what you can do with virtual reality. They're gonna make it a virtual reality roller coaster, but when you look around, it's gonna be like they talked about, like space and like aliens flying over the place and things like that. I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to try that. Like that'd be so awesome.
So they're tying Space Mountain, all the light show and everything that you see inside of Space Mountain. With the actual ride, but it's wherever you look. You don't just have to be tied to the static.
Well, this is
display.
Six Flags, so it's not Disneyland or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be like, however crazy you can get with VR, like you'll be able to see. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think, I'm not one to get motion sick, but I think being able to look around, not being able to look at a natural horizon would actually make me sick.
It's going to be, it's going to look real.
It better not be laggy, or else you're going to have a lot more people throwing up their cherry pie on the ride. Well, hey, so the last story that we wanted to touch on today. So there's a story in the Atlantic. I highly recommend everybody goes and reads it, as well as another story in the New York Times that really looked at this week the state of math education in the United States and the world. I think it was really well done. To the Atlantic story was really well done, and we're actually going to be speaking with the author on Monday. To really pick her brains about, I guess there's two questions that remain for me. One is are students actually just failing math, or is math education, that being the methodologies and the curriculum and common core practices or things that we're doing today, is today's way that we're teaching math actually failing the students? It found that, both articles, the New York Times article and the Atlantic article, looked at performance in, I think this past year was the first time that the United States had won the World Math Challenge. And one of the benefits, or not benefits, but one of the advantages that we had this year over previous years, because it's been 14 or 15 years, I think, since we had actually won the challenge, was that each of the students who had gone and participated in the math challenge were all actually receiving private math lessons and taking math courses outside of their regular classroom settings. Now, I don't know if that's because they're math geeks. I don't know if these are people who just really have an affinity for math, but still, the fact that every single one of them was taking courses outside of their regular school course load showed that there's a specific way, and each one of them were also in a different model of math instruction that you don't get in your regular school system. Not because of the one-on-one attention, but because of the model of which they were learning it. One of the New York Times story that I also mentioned was written by a teacher or a professor at Queens College in New York, who teaches a incoming freshman math course. And part of that course, he had two sections of it. One section, he taught the traditional standard, here's your freshman college algebra that you do rote memory courses or exercises, and you just have to work your way through quadratics and whatever you need to know for your math. The other section, he actually started teaching what he called teaching a linguistic skill, math as if it's a linguistic skill, by creating proficiency in chart reading and chart creation, making relational statements about math and the analysis of if this group grows at a faster rate versus another group, what can you say about potential outcomes? But by having a visual representation or spatial representations in a chart form and having that proficiency, they were 4 to 5 times, they were progressing 4 to 5 times faster than a class that had actually had to just go through regular exercises. And just having that type of making math and linguistic skill model, he completely rewrote all of his sections of the classes for the past couple of years, and he's seen dramatic results in going to the chart methodologies. So, we will be doing I'm planning on doing kind of a larger form investigation on this. My sister is actually a math teacher in the St. Louis area for 8th grade, where she's starting to teach the pre-algebra. I have a friend of mine in New York who's a teacher in a K through 5 school, as well as administrators. And then around the corner from us here in San Francisco, there was a movie a couple of years ago called Waiting for Superman that actually looked at charter schools and how charter schools are doing different. One of those schools is actually that was featured there with high success is right around the corner. So we hope to go over and speak with some of their math instructors and administrators to see really what is the state of math education, with every state moving to Common Core, with student, where does the drop off happen from student interest in math? Does it really happen at 3rd grade? And if it happens around that age, why does it happen? Is it because now we've gone from, here's 3 apples and here's 2 apples, you put them together, you have 5 apples in a relational kind of sense, much like the charts, to kind of just exercises and the box method of now multiplication and addition, or the Chinese line drawings or Japanese line drawing for multiplication. There's a bunch of quote unquote awkward ways of doing math these days that people are introducing that, I think, Andrew, you and I would sit there and say, what was wrong with the old way? I think you and I still sing the quadratic song whenever we have to do a quadratic, or at least I do.
X equals negative B.
So it's interesting. Math has always come easy for me, but it's one of those things where I can see how what the authors are saying about the interest of math dropping off, because it becomes non-relational and not non-spatial. It's not something that everybody does every day.
Right. Yeah, and I was the math tutor for a while, and you definitely see kids these days struggle a lot, and not really sure why. I have some reasons, but we'll probably save it for Monday.
Yeah. But anybody who's watching, if you see this video, your thoughts on the math problem as well. What do you think is going on? What worked for you? What didn't work for you? We want to know, if we were to go back to math class again today, would we be lost in space, or will we be able to pick up where we left off? And if we're able to pick up where we left off, why did we not lose our proficiency? For some people, it's because they went into a field that mathematics is used every day. For some people, it may not be. I was a communications major, and that was because my math skills dropped off. After a while, I just stopped doing math. And so if I don't have the proficiency today, if I went into my sister's class, would I be able to do a basic quadratic anymore? I think I could be. I still remember the song. Thank you, Miss Mancrini. So,
yeah, what was interesting is when I got my bachelor's in science, it had been maybe 5-6 years since I was in a math class before that, and I went straight into calculus.
Right.
And it was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I spent the time before I even enrolled in the class. I had to go back through and go through all my algebra and all my pre-cal and all that stuff, because I knew I wasn't gonna, math is you know, as Chris said, it's like a linguistic skill. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. You know, I took Hebrew in college, and I don't remember any of that. And I took sign language. I don't remember any of that. So people have taken a language before that don't use it all the time. You lose it because you don't use it, and the same goes with math. So you have to treat it like a language. Treat it like you're learning Chinese, or Spanish, or French, or Italian. You got to use it all the time. You gotta immerse yourself in that world. You know, if you're learning a foreign language, the best thing to do after you learn it is to visit that country and spend a month there. You know, so you can conversate with people, and the same goes with math.
Yep. Well, I think that about does it for our weekly news segments. We have some interesting stuff coming up in the next week. Both Andrew and I have Amazon Echo. It's been fun trying to try some of the new things. Andrew, what are some of the new things you've been trying with Echo?
I've been trying some of the if this then that features. So there's one where you can have notifications sent to your phone, or for me, I got my Android watch. You can send notifications there, or if if I can't find my phone, you can ask the Echo to call it, and it'll call your phone. Hopefully you get your ringer on, and it'll ring. But yeah, and then some of the other things that I use it for, like turning off a light switch and checking traffic, getting the weather every morning. I also use it for my grocery list. Every time I go grocery shopping, whenever I'm around, I just say, "Hey, Alexa, add detergent to my shopping list," and she'll put it on there. And as Chris mentioned earlier, I just picked up I pre-ordered a Echo Dot. It's a smaller version of the Echo. It's similar, just doesn't have the big speaker on it. So should be getting that at the end of March. Might do a review on that when we get it.
Very good.
What about you?
Well, for me, it's been Echo's become kind of the family entertainment device. Having two kids that love music, love kids songs in the morning, it's nice to be able to just walk into the kitchen and say, Alexa, play or Wake Up the Kids, and it'll play an album called Wake Up the Kids, or they used to play the Wiggles, and I say used to because I shot a video of my daughter trying to get the Wiggles on, and the Wiggles are no longer available on Prime Music, and so she ends up crying. Funny and sad at the same time, but it actually kind of showed one thing of the Amazon service, is that a lot of the things that are available on Prime Music actually do tend to fall off a lot, kind of like Netflix videos where they cycle them in and out. So, that's not one of the things that they highly publicize of what's coming in, what's going out on Prime Music. They do it on their Prime videos, but they don't do it so much in the music. So if there's something that you really like that's on Prime Music, you either have to add it to your library or hope that they keep it around for a while. I've also used it to read a Kindle book for me. I actually had it read a section of The Martian to me. Also, Audible is a nice feature. If you have any Audible books, for my wife and I think we've asked Alexa a couple of times to play something. The only Audible book that we have is Go the F to Sleep, which really isn't great when you've got two kids sitting around the dinner table and you tell Alexa to, Alexa, tell me a story, and she starts reading that book. So we turned that off pretty quickly. I also ordered an Uber and it ended up bringing the most expensive Uber possible. And I took the Uber to the movie theater, which is about a mile away, and it cost me $40. Yeah. It was horrible because I guess it was also peak pricing when it happened, and Alexa, the app, nothing told you that it was peak pricing. So yeah, I ended up having to pay $40 to go like 2 miles to the movie theater. So it was pretty ridiculous.
Is that the Uber Black?
Yeah, it was the Uber Black. So
what kind of car?
I got a limit. It was a Escalade, totally tricked out Escalade that picked me up and took me to the movie theater.
Now, why didn't you just drive to the theater?
Well, because I wanted to use, Alexa. I want to test out what happened when I, ordered an Uber, and apparently that's what happened. So, but the bullet on that one. Good thing it was synced to my personal card and not the joint joint checking account. So wife didn't need to yell at me. But anyhow, yeah, so there's a lot of things that I've been able to try. The if this then that, by the way, it's ifttt.com. If you want to try it out, we may actually end up doing a full review on just IFTTT and automation and how we can automate things. That might be a fun thing for us to try. But that's another one. We've got a couple of other ones on the horizon. We said drones inside gaming development. 3D printing will be fun. Maybe we'll find some fun challenges for you guys as well. We were looking at printing some of our tokens, so we might have a weekly challenge for anybody that wants to log on to our website and check out our whether it be a math challenge or science challenge for you. And the winners will get a nice ExpeditionSTEM present in their mailbox one day. So those are, I think, the review of the week. Stay tuned. We'll have the Amazon Echo coming up. Hopefully we'll have that one compiled here soon. We might have another undercover or recon review. If you haven't seen the recon review that we did, or that Andrew did, of the Galaxy S7, go out and check it out before you decide to buy. It's very well done, very in-depth. Dude knows what he's talking about, so check it out.
Yeah, we actually just filmed an unboxing of a S7 last night with my friend KJ, who we're also doing the 3D printing video with, so that should be up in the next day or two as well.
Awesome. Well, that about does it for our time today. Folks, thanks again for tuning in. Watch our video, rate it. If you like us, subscribe to the channel. And please, your comments make our show better. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, and what your thoughts are on our news in science, technology, engineering, and math. So until next time, thanks a lot. I'm Chris. That's Andrew. We'll see you soon.
Bye.